They laughed at her for being a woman working on the job site, until they tasted their own medicine. The sharp crack of the slap sent her hard hat flying, rolling across the ground until it stopped next to a stack of bricks. That day, Sarah didn't know it yet, but Scott and Edward had already decided she wouldn't last long on that job site. Laughter echoed like a cruel chorus, and Sarah brought a hand to her head, feeling her scalp burn. "Learn how to work, useless," said Scott, the foreman, his voice dripping with contempt. She kept her gaze steady, but her stomach churned. "Give me back my hard hat," she asked, reaching for it. Scott kicked it farther away. "You won't need it. You're going to scrub this floor on your knees until I say you're done," he ordered. "Out here you either learn or you break," he whispered with a sneer. The heat beat down hard, the sun bounced off raw concrete, and the ground felt like sandpaper scorching skin. Sarah knelt, the roughness tearing at her pants. "This is humiliation, and you know it," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Scott leaned in, close to her face. "Humiliation? I'm doing you a favor. Learn to respect men at work," he replied, while two co-workers laughed and pulled out their phones. Their phone cameras recorded her every move. "Look at the princess of the job site, cleaning on her knees," one of them mocked. Sarah's back throbbed, sweat dripped into her eyes, and her throat burned with anger. "Delete that now," she demanded, staring at one of the guys. "Shut up and work," he shot back, pointing his phone like a weapon. Time crawled. Hours later, with her knees throbbing and her skin raw, Sarah heard a metallic clank from above. She glanced over and saw Scott let a beam go. The weight crashed down inches from her, still smacking her leg hard enough to make her scream. "Are you insane?" she yelled, clutching her leg as waves of pain surged. Scott took a slow step, watching her coldly. "If you were where you were supposed to be, this wouldn't have happened," he said, turning his back. "Somebody call for help," Sarah shouted to the others, but the men just looked at each other and went back to work like nothing had happened. "Nobody's wasting time on your whining," Scott added as he walked off. Pain spread through her leg, and every attempt to put weight on it was torture. With nobody helping, she was forced to finish the shift like that. Later, when she tried to get back to work, she found her shovel caked with hardened concrete, heavy as a rock. When she tried to free it, the handle slipped in her hand. Someone had loosened it on purpose. The muffled laughs from two co-workers left no doubt who'd done it. One of them, with a crooked smile, muttered, "You'd better keep a closer eye on your stuff. You never know when it'll disappear." By mid-afternoon, a laborer named George walked over quietly and handed her a bottle of water. "I saw what happened earlier. It wasn't right," he said under his breath. Sarah tried to smile, but he glanced around like he was afraid of being seen. "We'll talk later." He walked away, leaving only a promise hanging in the air. At the end of the day, Sarah limped to the bus stop. Every step felt like a blade cutting into her flesh. Over the last few months since she'd started there, it felt like she was living in a nightmare that never ended, humiliated day after day just for being a woman, ignored whenever she tried to report it, doubted by everyone as if she were the problem. Every look, every laugh, every complicit silence told her they were all part of the same filthy machine. Even so, she needed the job. When she got home, exhausted, she barely opened the door before her little boy ran to hug her. Sarah closed her eyes and held him tight, feeling the warmth of that fragile body. He was the reason she kept going. The next day, still limping after a night of makeshift bandages and trying to dull the pain, she got to the site determined not to cave. But when she walked into the storage shed, she found her tools tossed in the trash, crusted with hardened concrete. In the makeshift office, on the table, lay a paper with her name and a hard, bold accusation: theft. "This is ridiculous," she said, gripping the sheet. Edward, the site manager, sat behind the desk with a half smile. "We received a complaint and evidence. You know we can't allow this kind of behavior," he said, folding his arms. "What evidence? You're making this up," Sarah shot back, blood boiling. "Sign here admitting it and we'll handle this internally." "Or would you rather take it to the police?" Edward slid another document toward her. "I'm not signing a lie," she said firmly, pushing the paper back. Edward chuckled under his breath. "Then you're suspended until further notice." Sarah walked out of the site trailer under malicious stares. Outside, she felt the weight of his words. At home, when she turned on her phone, the screen filled with messages. They were links to videos. She hit play and saw cut and edited footage where she looked like she was smiling or touching co-workers' arms, followed by insinuations that she was leading the men on. "This is disgusting," she whispered, feeling the ground drop out from under her. That same day, relatives and neighbors started avoiding her eyes. "We didn't know you were like that," an aunt said before closing the door. The isolation grew like a shadow. Determined to report it, she went to the administrative building. But at the front desk, 2 security guards blocked her. "Orders from upstairs. You're not coming in," one of them said without meeting her eyes. "That's illegal," she replied. But the man just repeated, "Don't push it." That's when Donna, an older co-worker, appeared at her side, taking Sarah by the arm before she got into it with security. Donna's face was weathered by the sun and her hands were calloused. Sarah remembered seeing her on another job a while back, always working hard, saying little. "It's no use. I've seen this before," Donna said, voice low and edged with bitter certainty, pulling Sarah away from the entrance. They walked to a simple diner. Stirring her coffee, Donna let out a heavy sigh. "It's not just you. Other women went through this. Same story. It starts with jokes. Then they humiliate you in front of everyone, and when you try to push back, comes the false accusation." As she spoke, Donna pulled a crumpled photo from her coat pocket and set it on the table. A woman in a hard hat, on her knees on the job site, surrounded by men laughing. She tried to sue. "Today, nobody knows where she is," Donna said, taking her cup again. Sarah was about to answer when she noticed across the street a man in a company uniform standing on the sidewalk, pretending to talk on the phone while staring straight at them. He didn't blink. Donna saw him too, and without turning her head, squeezed Sarah's arm under the table. "Pretend you didn't see him. They do that to intimidate you. And the more you show fear, the more they come back," she added, eyes still on the street. Sarah looked at her, trying to grasp the scale of it. Donna shook her head, her eyes hardening. "The complaints vanish and they get promoted. It's a game they already know how to play." Sarah gripped her cup, feeling anger rise. "And no one's ever managed to change it?" she asked. Donna gave a short, humorless laugh. "They tried, but they end up isolated, unemployed, with their reputations destroyed. They don't just take your job, they take your voice." Sarah held her gaze. "Then let's change it," she said, reaching across the table. Donna studied that resolve for a few seconds, then clasped Sarah's hand firmly. As they left the diner, Sarah nearly bumped into a man in an engineer's vest who had just arrived at the site. "You're Sarah?" he asked, frowning like he already knew her name. "I am." "Why?" she answered cautiously. "I've heard some stories about you. Honestly, I don't buy them." He paused, meeting her eyes. "And if you're right, I think I can help." Sarah kept her guard up. "Why would you?" "Because I can't stand injustice, and because I found something, internal documents with your name and orders that don't match what they're saying." Sarah narrowed her eyes. "Can you show me?" "Not yet. I need to confirm a few things and be sure I can trust you," he said before stepping away. "We'll talk soon." For a few seconds, Sarah stood there, his words echoing in her head. She still didn't know if she could trust him, but the possibility that someone on the inside knew the truth was a spark she couldn't ignore. She decided to keep it to herself for now and stick to the plan with Donna. At night, the two of them started gathering photos, messages, anything that could be evidence. George, who'd worked at the site for years, agreed to testify. He even recorded a few voice notes detailing what he'd seen to serve as proof, but made it clear he wanted to speak in person so no one could doubt his word. "I saw what they did to you. I won't keep quiet," he said. But the next day, George didn't show. Word spread fast, fired, then silence, phone off. "That's no coincidence," Donna said, voice shaking. "They must have threatened him and he backed out." Even so, they kept going. Days later, they managed to record Scott talking to a co-worker and admitting part of the setup. "We just find a way to get rid of the troublemakers," he said on the audio. With the phone in hand, they went to a notary public. But on the corner, Edward appeared, as if he knew exactly where and when to find them. "Give me that," he said, ripping the phone from Donna's hand. They tried to fight back, uselessly, and he vanished with the device. "Somehow he knew our plan," Sarah said, a chill running down her spine. "We'll have to rebuild the evidence," she added, but Donna said nothing. A few days later, Sarah got the call. Donna was in the hospital, unconscious. According to her family, she'd been assaulted and would be taken to another city for safety. When Sarah visited, she saw her friend pale, hooked up to tubes. "I won't stop," she promised, holding Donna's hand. The room seemed to shrink around her, the silence heavy. Sarah knew she was alone now, but anger burned hotter than fear. "They're going to answer for this," she said, staring at the door as if she could see the next blow coming. In the days that followed, Sarah moved through the site like a shadow, avoiding eye contact while everyone seemed to whisper and laugh behind her back. She'd returned to work after days of suspension, reinstated only because one of them, probably Edward, found it more convenient to keep her close to finish ruining her. During one of those silent passes, she heard a line from Scott's trailer that froze her blood. "Next week we get rid of her for good," he said to another supervisor. She didn't need to hear more. The word "fired" hammered in her head, mixed with memories of every humiliation. The next day, while she was stacking materials, the same engineer she'd bumped into earlier walked up wearing a grave expression. "My name's Donald," he said, finally introducing himself. "I can show you now." He opened his hand to reveal a flash drive. "You got it?" she asked, keeping her voice down. "Yeah, it's all here," he said, glancing around like he was afraid of being seen. Before she could say anything, his phone buzzed. He answered, and as he listened, the color drained from his face. "What happened?" Sarah asked, uneasy. In silence, he showed her the screen. Doctored photos where the two of them looked like they were together in a room. "Edward, it has to be him." "Somehow he knows I'm helping you," Donald muttered. "If they're doing this to me, imagine what they'll do to you," he added, looking away. "They're fake," Sarah exclaimed. "I know, but now everyone's going to believe them," he said, visibly shaken. "It doesn't matter. We have to move forward with the evidence," she insisted. He averted his eyes. "I'm sorry. I can't be involved anymore. They'll destroy me too." Before he left, he pressed the flash drive into her hand. "At least this stays with you." Sarah held it like it was gold, and once home, hid it at the back of a locked drawer, wrapped in an old scrap of cloth. "At least they won't find it here," she told herself. On the day she was supposed to hand everything to the district attorney's office, she woke up early, chest tight with anxiety. But when she got home after work, she found the door busted open, rooms ransacked, drawers pulled out. The makeshift hiding place was empty. "No, this can't be," she murmured, collapsing to her knees in the middle of the room. She spent the whole night trying to think of a way out, but dawn broke without answers. The next day, Sarah went back to the site, determined not to show weakness, but the air itself felt loaded. Something was about to happen. While she sorted blocks in the storage area, she heard a metallic snap above. She looked over and for a second saw a beam hanging by a rusted cable, swaying dangerously. Before she could jump away, the cable snapped and the structure crashed down, crushing crates inches from where she'd been standing. The boom shook the ground. Through the dust, Scott appeared, feigning surprise. "Almost lost the job site, Princess," he said with a crooked smile. "But there's still time," he murmured, low enough that only she could hear. Two co-workers chuckled in the back, as if they were waiting for the worst. A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. She was sure it had been planned. Hours later, back home, her body still tight and her mind racing through the scene, someone knocked at her door. A middle-aged man with a briefcase introduced himself. "I'm a reporter at a local paper. I've been investigating corruption in construction," he said, stepping in carefully. "And what do you want with me?" Sarah asked, still wary. "People told me what happened to you. I followed the leads, cross-checked, and found your name in conversations and documents I've been looking into for months," he said, setting the case on the table. "I've got proof tying Scott and Edward to an extortion scheme against workers." He opened the case and pulled out a newspaper clipping with a headline exposing irregularities in public works. Next to it, there was a photo of Scott shaking hands with a local politician. "That's just the tip. Here are fake contracts, bank statements, even lists of names," he said, spreading the papers across the table for Sarah to see. Before he could continue, his phone buzzed. He answered, said a few words, and hung up, face tenser. He walked to the window and peered outside, as if checking whether someone was on the street. "Sorry, we should be quick," he said, returning to the table. Sarah skimmed the pages. Bogus contracts, transfer receipts, even name lists. "This is what we need," she said, feeling hope return. "I'll make copies and get them to you safely," the reporter said, closing the case. "Better not stay together too long. It'll draw attention." She agreed, and he left, looking both ways before disappearing down the street. The next morning, while she was having coffee, Sarah got a call from an unknown number. "Is this Sarah?" a serious voice asked. "It is." "Who's this?" she replied, her stomach already twisting. "This is the hospital. The gentleman from the local paper asked us to reach you. He was assaulted last night and is in intensive care." Minutes later, she was at his bedside in the ER. His face was bruised, bandages wrapped around his head. He opened his eyes with effort, his voice weak but certain. "It was them. I know it was them," he murmured, trying to move but pinned by pain. Sarah gripped the side of the bed, anger burning in her chest at his words. News spread fast, and Scott and Edward used the situation to pressure the higher-ups into shutting down all temporary projects. "Everybody's out, her included," Edward said with a satisfied smile while co-workers packed their things. On the last day, as Sarah boxed up her few belongings, she heard a voice behind her. "Figured you'd need this." She turned and saw George. Her heart jumped. "You disappeared," she said, stunned. He gave a tired smile. "I had to hide. But I managed to collect some proof. It's all here," he said, holding up a flash drive. Sarah took it like it was gold. "With this, we end them," she said. Hours later, the complaints were filed and the investigation began. The result was devastating. A network of harassment, fraud, and sabotage came to light. Scott and Edward tried to strike back, accusing Sarah of having made it all up. "You've got nothing!" Scott yelled during a hearing. Sarah stood slowly, meeting his stare. "We've got more than enough to bury you, and to make sure no one forgets what you did," she replied, her steady voice echoing through the room. Right then, recordings, emails, and witnesses unraveled every lie. George told what he'd seen behind the scenes. Donald admitted he'd obtained the internal emails and explained the doctored images. Donna, recovered, detailed the assault and the setups, and the reporter handed over the documents linking Scott and Edward to the extortion scheme. As the judge prepared to read the sentence, Scott leaned forward with a cold smile. "This won't stick. Someone always owes me a favor," he whispered, low enough for only Sarah to hear. Sarah turned slowly, keeping her eyes on him. "Then you'd better call in that favor now, because pretty soon you won't be making any calls," she said with a half smile. A murmur rippled through the courtroom, and the judge spoke again. 20 years in prison for coercion, fraud, and harassment. Sarah heard the sentence with trembling hands, feeling years of weight fall from her shoulders. On the day she returned to the job site for her first project after the win, she hung a small, handwritten sign at the entrance. "Here, the people who build deserve respect." Reading the words, she took a deep breath, knowing that this time she'd won. 2 workers who had laughed at her in the past stopped at the gate, staring at the sign in silence, not daring to meet her gaze. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a comment, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. See you in the next story.